You know that patient? The one who's become more isolated as their hearing has declined. It's a clinical picture we see all the time. But what if we've only been looking at half of the story? Today, we're going to explore some really compelling new evidence that suggests this isn't a one-way street, it's a feedback loop.
So, think about that patient for a second. We tend to assume their withdrawal is a consequence of their hearing loss. But here are the questions we need to start asking. What if their feeling of loneliness isn't just a symptom, but is an active driver of their auditory decline? And what if their social world is having a direct physical impact on their sensory neural health?
Look, the traditional thinking makes perfect sense, right? Trouble hearing leads to trouble communicating, which leads to social withdrawal and, ultimately, loneliness. That path is well worn. But today, we're flipping the script. We're looking at the evidence that shows loneliness itself can be a potent risk factor for developing hearing loss in the first place.
Now, this isn't just a theory. This is all coming from a massive cohort study using data from the UK Biobank. It's titled Loneliness and Risk of Incident Hearing Loss, and it was published in Health Data Science in 2025. As always, you can find the link to the full study in the description below.
So what's the headline finding? It's this number. Individuals who reported feeling lonely had a 24% higher risk of developing new onset hearing loss over a 12-year follow-up. And let's be clear, this isn't just a simple correlation. This is after the researchers adjusted for a whole host of other potential causes.
And this chart really tells the story visually. You can see the two groups, the lonely and the not lonely, starting at the same place. But then, over the 12-year period, those lines just steadily pull apart. The gap widens year after year, which shows us this is a persistent, cumulative risk that builds over time.
Okay, this is the point where we have to ask the big question, the one you're probably thinking right now. How can a subjective feeling and emotion cause actual physical damage to the delicate parts of the auditory system? What's the mechanism here?
Well, the answer seems to be that we need to stop thinking of loneliness as just a feeling and start seeing it as a state of chronic biological stress. It's like a low-grade fever for the entire system. It triggers real, measurable physiological changes, more systemic inflammation, higher blood pressure, and a dysregulated stress response, with the HPA axis going into overdrive. All of these things are known to damage the fragile vascular and neural systems that our hearing depends on.
And here's a crucial piece of the puzzle that really strengthens this biological argument. The link was found specifically with sensory neural hearing loss. It wasn't seen with conductive hearing loss, from mechanical issues. No, this is damage to the cochlea and the auditory nerve pathways, the exact structures that are most vulnerable to the kind of inflammatory and vascular damage we were just talking about.
Now, for any of you who are still skeptical, and you should be, this forest plot is pretty powerful. The researchers threw everything at this finding. They controlled for age, sex, smoking, diabetes, hypertension, social isolation, the use of ototoxic drugs like aspirin, even genetic risk. And as you can see, the risk from loneliness held firm. It really appears to be a strong, independent risk factor.
Things get even more interesting when the data is broken down by sex. The connection was actually quite a bit stronger in women. They had a 30% increased risk compared to an 18% increased risk in men. This might point to some underlying differences in physiological vulnerability to the stress of loneliness.
So we know loneliness is an independent risk factor, but what happens when you combine it with a genetic predisposition for hearing loss? Well, you get a synergistic effect, a real double whammy. The group with both high genetic risk and loneliness had an incredible 86% increased risk. This shows how our environment and our emotional state can dramatically amplify our genetic vulnerabilities.
Okay, the data is compelling. So what do we do with it? How do we take these findings and actually apply them in our day-to-day practice?
Here are 3 key takeaways. First, we need to ask. Just like we ask about blood pressure or smoking, we should start asking about loneliness as a vital sign of psychosocial health, especially in our at-risk patients. Second, we need to reframe this for ourselves and for our patients. Loneliness isn't just a sad feeling, it's a modifiable risk factor, just like hypertension or diabetes. And third, we need to educate. By explaining this two-way street, we empower our patients. We help them see that building social connections isn't just good for their mood, it's a concrete step they can take to protect their hearing.
And if you want a simple way to remember this and share it with your colleagues, here's a mnemonic for you. Check the ears. Emotional state affects receptive sound. It's a quick reminder that what's going on in a patient's mind and social life can have a real impact on their ears.
So, to sum it all up, this research really shifts our whole perspective. It's not just that the ear affects the mind profoundly affects the ear. We're looking at a vicious cycle where hearing loss can spark loneliness, and that loneliness can then turn around and pour fuel on the fire, accelerating further hearing damage.
And this leads us to a pretty incredible clinical thought. When we take steps to address a patient's loneliness, whether that's a referral, encouraging community activities, or just opening up that conversation, we aren't just doing good psychosocial care. We may very well be performing a critical act of hearing preservation.
Disclaimer and bibliography in the description.